have the economy, ecology, and society. All right? So you'll see that kind of document. Different authors use different terminology, but it's always something to do with economics, something to do with nature, and with societal structure. Right? So these three dimensions are always critical in the sustainability debate. You know, different authors say, oh, we'll call it something different, but essentially, this is what they're doing. All right? So this type of Venn diagram shows that you've got these three dimensions that you have to bring into the analysis. And so with that structure, we look at the economy first and economic growth. The key thing with economic growth and expanding this pie is that you have a global economic system, right? One of the big things you hear is that, you know, outsourcing jobs or returning manufacturing. Apple is now bringing some manufacturing back to the U.S. that they were doing in China. China is now outsourcing some of its manufacturing to Vietnam because labor rates are now too high in China, they are lower in Vietnam. So you have these market signals, and in a global economic system, where you produce something is no longer, oh, we have a factory in town and everybody in town works at that factory. Okay? You have a whole supply chain that is global. You are getting products of everything. Now, does it make sense to have the wings of a plane built in Japan transported to Seattle? All right? Well, if the labor or technology or manufacturing capabilities require that are only available in Japan, maybe it does make sense. You know, that's part of what we're seeing. What does outsourcing do? So essentially, when you look at this integrated world and the integrated economy, we're looking at this long-term growth that no nation or community is left behind. So this goes back to the equity issue. So if you look at this, you're talking about efficiency and equity. Right? So you've got the two dimensions right here. Let's take advantage of this global integration, but let's make sure we're not just going into a country, extracting its natural resources, and leaving. Okay? So if you look at a lot of natural resource countries that are rich in natural resources, are they developed countries or developing countries? It's called the resource curse in economics, where you'll have a lot of countries that are rich in natural resources, but the developed world comes in, takes those resources, takes them offshore to develop them back in the developed world. So you've got these conflicts, and that's what they're trying to get at. Don't just go in, take the resources, leave $20, and then say everything's been equitably distributed. The second issue, conserving natural resources and the environment. So here, what does this mean? To conserve our environmental heritage and natural resources for future generations. Again, that sustainability concept of intergenerational equity. Economically viable solutions must be developed. Now, notice how it's framed. You're going to reduce resource consumption. So we have to use less of the natural assets. Right? Because the way we're using the natural assets is not sustainable. Okay? We have to stop pollution, conserve natural habitats. So you've got biodiversity issues here. How do we conserve natural assets? Do we stop? Do we go to Brazil and say, no more destruction of the rainforest here. Brazil says, but wait a second, you guys destroyed all your rainforests and developed. Isn't it fair that we use our natural resources and develop? So how do we have those equity arguments saying, yeah, we did it and we grew, but now we don't think you should do it. And that's obviously China's arguments for developing coal-fired plants. Every week opening a new plant. All right? So we've got issues with intergenerational, and if we say we have to reduce resource consumption, does that mean we have to stop economic growth? That we're not going to be able to grow. So the mirror image of sustainability is what's called sustainable development. So sustainable development is where sustainability actually started, because countries were saying, oh, we want to develop, and then the World Bank, UN would come along and say, yes, you want to develop it, do so sustainably. And what does it mean to develop sustainably? It means do not rely on fossil fuels as your energy base, right? So because relying on fossil fuels is not sustainable. Yes, it'll be cheaper for the 10 years, 20 years, but not for 100 years. There's not that resources there. Your capital investment would have to change, right? The third, social or society. So here, it's really an issue of, they use things like the rich fabric of cultural and social diversity. How many of you have traveled and been in a city and you're walking down to the city and say, well, wait a second, this is just like walking down LA. And all the stores are the same. This is called a galleria, it's called a mall here or whatever. So it's how diverse, how do you maintain this cultural diversity, the cultural identity as you develop? I was in northern Sweden above the Arctic Circle, walking around in the downtown there. Pitch dark about 3 in the afternoon. And I walk by and there's a Roxy store. And it's not a lot of surfing going on there and everything. So, every place has the same brands, has the same type of goods you can buy. So how do we make sure that you maintain this cultural identity, that the rights of workers are respected, all members of society are empowered? This is added in almost all UN World Bank declarations because of the suppression of women globally, right? So this all members of society are empowered, is dealing with the gender discrimination issues primarily. All right? So you've got the 3 dimensions, those 3 circles in the Venn diagram that look at it. Now, the main point of all of this, the economy, environment, and society are interdependent. Right? You make a change in one, it's going to have spillover into the others. Right? These are not isolated, independent systems that you can manage one system and it has no impact on the other systems. I'm sure you've talked about feedback loops, positive feedback loops, negative feedback loops. You can see if you are only concerned about growing the economy, you can have severe negative feedback loops into the natural system. So you have to treat these as interdependent in your management. Right? Now, knowing that they're interdependent is one thing. The next aspect is how much weight does each get in planning. So what do we see in our own society? Right? When we talk about, we're going to increase, let's see, what's a good example? Sulfur dioxide in the 1980s was sulfur dioxide and NOx were There was all